Hi and welcome to this podcast with me, Geeta Joshi, and today I am talking to sculptor Patricia Volk. Welcome, Patricia.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me along to chat.
Did I say your name right? Is it Volk or Volk?
Volk. You did it very well first time.
Cool.
Don't worry, everybody seems to have that trouble.
So why don't we start with describing your work? How do you describe your work?
Oh, it's a very difficult one, actually. I don't like to pre-describe anything, really. I prefer the person or whoever is viewing it to have their opinion on it rather than mine. But I presume what I would say is that people would say they're very highly coloured, hopefully tactile, and occasionally people say they it makes them smile.
Which really
I think is quite nice. Yeah. I don't intend to do any of those things. I don't intend not to, let's put it that way. So I'm quite happy at any response I sort of get to the work. And if it's a happy response, then I'm happy as well.
I think the combo of colours that you use is a really, happiness invoking sort of palette that you have actually, in these lovely sort of sculptural forms, or abstract forms even. Sort of very, for me, I always sort of think of like Matisse and people like that when I see your work with them. Matisse is like, say, paper cuts. Which artist do you say inspire your work, or which artist do you look to?
Actually, that's really interesting because I remember going to a talk by Melvyn Bragg quite a long time ago, and he sort of said if you know who you are influenced by, you only know that about 2 years after you finished the project. And another person, Anna Maria Pacheco, very well-known sculptor, went to a talk by her, and she said she didn't realise what her influences were until she had to actually do a talk. But I think one of the things I realised last year, that I went to America, it must have been over 20 years ago, and I saw different sorts of ceramics there than I'd ever seen in this country. I went to the Getty and I saw sculptures that had been pulled out, ceramic sculptures that had been pulled out of under the sea that were at least 2,000 years old, and they had used paint as well as a glaze, as what you would expect in this country. So I was that was when a penny dropped with me then. And also about 2 years ago, I went to an exhibition at Heiser and Wirth in London and saw the work of Ken Price. Suddenly, it all came together. When I was in America about 25 years ago, I went around various sort of like places looking at American ceramics. And there it was completely acceptable to use acrylics and colours on top of glazes. Whereas in the British tradition, it's very much pot orientated, which is not the way I really want to go at all with ceramics. I model freely and I change my mind constantly. So by modelling and working with acrylics and colours, it allows me to keep changing my mind. So I would say one of my main influences are the American ceramists of the 70s, which was Ken Price. There's also fantastic ceramists called, you can't call them ceramists, they're sculptors called Juno Cankeo. And I'm always constantly looking at work. So I'm influenced by everything that I see every day. If I go on the internet, I'm constantly scanning to see if there's a colour combination I like that I can steal, that I can reuse, and it'll start me on another lot. So I'm like last week I was in Cornwall and I went to St Ives, and there's a fantastic exhibition of Patrick Hearn's work. I really recommend anyone just go to see that because the colours, I've never actually sort of looked at them that closely, but the colours were just so fantastic. And there's one particular bit that I read that he uses there's large areas of colour, but they're not put on the roller or a big brush. He did it all with a small brush so that the colour doesn't look flat. There's a lot of movement in the colour because of the way the paint has been applied. So I know that my next work will bring that up again, although I have used exactly the same technique in the past. I was really overjoyed. I think, oh gosh, I'm not the only one that thought about it like not. But anyway, it was a great opportunity for it to reassure me that the way I was laying on paint and how I will lay on paint in the future will be influenced by someone such as Patrick Hearn. There's another American sculptor who I saw at the ICA, I think last year or the year before, which was Betty Woodrow, who again works on ceramics, but again puts it maybe on a painted background and paints the floor, paints everything around it. So it's not just one little piece. It's like thinking of the overall effect of where it will be put.
What does that mean? Like the plinth and everything gets painted?
It's not even a plinth that she uses. She might just put a piece of paper on the floor, get a pile of paint and put it on the floor, make something in clay, put it on top, paint on top of that, and use various sort of glazes, anything that comes to hand, because the end result is the thing that is important, rather than sort of saying, well, again, people sort of say to me when they see my work, they sort of say, oh, you're not using glazes. And I'll say, well, why should I? I can't understand that. And sort of say, oh, well, that's a bit funny. And I sort of think, well, it's not really. You know, as I say, it was very prominent in America in the 70s. It's just that in this country, they've got a set way of doing things. And using acrylics on top of ceramics is not one of them. But it's what I do.
But that's a great thing about using. No, I was going to say that it's a great thing about using things like acrylic paints on the ceramics, because you've just got a much, much wider range of colours, surely. You know, I mean, I know there's a lot of ceramicists, well, the ones I know, actually quite a lot of them enjoy the unpredictability of the glaze and the chemistry of the mixing of the glazes and all of that.
Exactly.
And that's its own thing. But in terms of colour or consistency and the sort of richness and depth of colour that we see in your work, yeah, I can see totally why acrylics would be the most appealing. Have you tried other paints like spray paint or anything else?
Yes, except spray paint I find gets clogged up too easy. I have spent a small fortune on spray paint. So you get up, use it once, think, oh, I like that colour, put it aside, gets clogged up. I'm open to anything. I've even got oil paints down in the studio. Anything that comes along, I think, oh, that looks like a good effect. I'll give that a try and I'll go. I'm not restricted to any particular thing.
So your work's kind of quite experimental for each piece that you're making then?
Yes, I never sort of, when I'm deciding what piece I'm going to make, I normally work on a complete series, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 pieces at the same time, because I'm inclined to get a little bit hyperactive and a little bit sort of focused. But occasionally I might do a drawing, especially if it's a big piece, but a lot of the time I don't. I'll virtually sort of say, look, just get going. You sat around thinking here too long. Just move, move yourself and get going. So everything, it evolves of its making. As I say, I do have an idea. When you said before about how I like to work, I am in search of the perfect line. Whenever you look at a piece of work or any sort of sculpture and you're looking at almost the lines outside the work or the lines that go through the work, or literally just, there's some pieces I cut out at random. I'll lay out big slabs of clay and literally get a knife and just go right along the top of the clay and cut out a piece, then refine it, and then maybe build that into a particular element. Component is what I'm calling them now. And I will make rather a few of these components. If you look at my website, there's a blog there that actually covers how I do the work all the way through. And there's one particular page that shows all these components laid out. I'll lay them all out over the studio, and then I'll start and place them together and drill holes and stick them together and build. That's with some pieces. Other pieces will have a big form that will be very sculptural in the middle, but I'll still try and just try different sort of things and see how different things marry together.
One of the things I like about your work is actually on some of the pieces I've seen, there's quite a lot of space between the different components and the elements as well.
Again, I remember when I started to look at ceramics at the very beginning, or when I was at college, and you always get a feeling of weight at the bottom, mainly because whenever you're modelling, when I started to do work in ceramics, I used to do these big heads, and people would sort of say, well, where do you start? And with clay, you have to work, unless you use an armature, you have to work at the bottom, unless there's a little god up there that will hold it in front of you while you work down. But I didn't like the weight that you see with ceramics, that they're grounded. I wanted to lift things up and still want to lift up so that it gives the appearance of lightness. So I like the air going through the piece and no weight at the bottom. There is weight normally, but because of just pure construction, I'll need to add a little bit of weight to hold the balance of everything up.
So how big are your largest pieces?
Some of the pieces go up to about 1 metre 40, 1 metre 60. Again, those are done, and there might be a big, again, if you look at my website and you look at the larger pieces, there's large pieces there that shows all the measurements on them. It's very difficult, actually, for people inclined to think they are small. I like to think that I was almost like maquettes. I'd love the idea of someone coming along and say, hey, Patricia, what about doing this 20 foot high? And I think, oh, that sounds a good idea. I wouldn't mind doing that. Yeah. All for that. Yeah. So, as I say, I'm playing, and I'd love the opportunity to do a very large piece. But of course, you couldn't do that in ceramics. That would have to be done in metal and bronze. And if someone out there would like to commission me, I'm all for it.
Okay, well, we'll put that out there. I was thinking a fiberglass or something as well, potentially, like lighter weight would do that.
Yeah, you're right. It would do it really well, actually.
So do your works have a front and a back, or are they like actually you would walk around them? Because like I know that typically the pieces are more around the sort of 60 centimetre size. You know, you do quite a lot of sort of scale. Do they have a front and back, or they can be seen from any side, or how do you?
I suppose they do have a front and a back, but I invariably would like them to be seen by from any side that you walk around them. I'm quite particular about how they're shown, actually. I feel they should always be shown at eye height. You shouldn't look down on them. I remember someone telling me again years ago, you should show your work at the eye level that they are created at, because when you're working on something, you're getting the perfect eye level shot. So if I'm working on a piece, I'll move it up and down at eye level, because you're working on that particular part of the piece. I don't like the word plinth really, but ideally the pieces should be shown at eye height, and people should be able to walk around them. And I've noticed that in an exhibition I have had them with space around, you see them better. There's a couple of pieces I've just finished, actually, and they look quite good together. They do sing off each other, but invariably I think the pieces stand in their own right, and that you should walk around them.
And have you had any conflict with galleries or places that have shown your work where they've shown it too low or up against a wall and things like that? Because I know, we've talked about this before, like you know how best to show your work. And usually I find that the artist does know, whether it's with a print or a photograph, they know usually how best they want to present it to the world, whether it's in a frame or something. So how's that been for you?
I've had a few bits of bad luck, but it's invariably people that don't really know about sculpture. I think if you exhibit with a gallery, and I can mention one particular gallery who hung the Discerning Eye exhibition, which was quite a few years ago, and she hung it really sensitively. She knew what height to do it at. There's an awful lot of gallery people think, we'll put the sculpture onto the paintings, so it'll get in the way of the paintings. And actually even painters say that occasionally. And I think it's quite remarkable that this gallery who sensitively hung my work and placed it. That was the year I won the regional prize at the Discerning Eye. So I think it was down to someone knowing how to show the work. Mm-hmm. There's been other times at a show I saw someone had put it on the floor, and I don't even know what was going on in their brain, because unless you've got a really, really big space and you walk in and you can see the whole area in front of you, then maybe you can put a piece of work on the floor. Actually, in the ICA, they did have Betty Woodrow's work on the floor, but you've got space there. If you've got a small stand, especially in some of the art fairs, and you put a piece of sculpture down at ground level on a small plinth, nobody can see them. And I've heard galleries sort of say, oh, well, I don't sell much sculpture, they don't sell very well. And I think that's because you haven't put it in the right place. If you'd put it up a bit so that people would know what they're looking at, then people would appreciate what they're looking at. But there's other galleries that I've shown work with, and they've done a superb job. They've done a very good job. But it's invariably people that know sculpture and like it.
So how much time do you spend in the studio making versus, I don't know, the other aspects of what you do, like even promoting your work or finding, exhibitions to participate in and things like that?
I've got quite a high work ethic. It's rather simplistic, actually. I went back to art college as a mature student and had worked in advertising before that. So in a purely sort of like logical way, I sort of thought you finish college, and I was very lucky. Before I finished college, I'd actually got a studio locally. I think it was about 6 months before I finished my degree. And I think that I go to work. I get up, I drive down to my workshop, and I put in the hours each day, as you would a job. I do promote myself through social media. I think everybody finds that difficult, and I think most artists find it really difficult to promote themselves. So I can only say I try my best at that. I do put in as much hours as I can. Quite like social media, to be honest. Quite like Twitter. I've made some quite nice mates on Twitter. Tell you one thing, not Donald Trump though. He hasn't responded to anything. But I should put more work into promoting. But also, when you're a sculptor, to deliver work can take a long time. Moving it around, storing it. I'd say I've got I feel every so often I should go around the exhibitions. I don't think any artist can work in a vacuum. So I'm pretty near Heiser and Worth here, and Messams, and I love going up to the Tate. So I feel that is all part of what I do for a living.
So let's talk about your life as a mature student, because you took an active decision to go to art school, or you did foundation first and then follow through, go to art school. How was that for you?
Oh, it was fantastic, really. It was like a whole new way of life. Where I came from in Northern Ireland, the possibility of me going to art college was totally remote. I left home pretty young and came over to London. I was a one-parent family for a while, so that even the possibility of going to art college then was pretty remote. I worked in advertising. Again, I was very lucky to get a job in media. But then I started to meet people that had been to art college. My husband had been to art college. And I was literally sitting down one night, and I hadn't drawn for about 16 years, I think 16, 17 years. And I took out a pen and I thought, it's peculiar because I hadn't even let on to some of my closest friends that actually my real dream was to go to art college. And I thought, because when I was a child, I was completely obsessed with drawing. I was very dyslexic, and it was one way that I could have self-esteem in myself. I wasn't very good academically, but people would say, oh, go and you can go and look at Patricia drawing. She can really draw. So I wasn't an idiot anymore. It was, it made me feel good as a child. But as I say, coming over to London, the possibility of doing that was totally remote. My first priority was getting enough money to live and enough money to bring up my child. But I say with my husband, having gone to art college, and virtually all the other people I made friends with there, they sort of, I just thought, well, I'll just give it a go. I'll start to draw. And I started to draw that night. And I thought, I can still do it. It was really remarkable. It was a really awful little drawing, I think about it. I think it was a bowl of fruit I got sitting, or it might have even been the TV, which is probably what it was, because that's what I was watching. And I thought, this isn't too bad. Maybe I could do it. And I took a year out of adult education. I took a year out of work. I gave up my job. It was a difficult decision. I even sort of went back to a job because I lost faith a little bit, but I took a year and went to adult education classes. I did sculpting, starting to draw and paint. I think I did 3 adult education classes, and I also learned to drive that year as well, which is good because I decided to go to Middlesex. The only way to get there was by car. And then as I was getting a portfolio together, the whole time I did these adult education classes, I never spoke to anybody in the class because I was too terrified. I thought I was being a little bit better than I should do, you know what I mean? Still feeling totally lacking in confidence. But my husband was very encouraging, and other people were very encouraging as well. And I went to a party and met someone who I said I'd never met before, and they said, what are you doing? I said, well, I've taken a year out to try and get into art college. And she went and found out my address, rang up Middlesex Polytechnic and got me sent a application form for to apply foundation. I thought, well, I've got it. Can't do it. I thought, I'll give it a go. It doesn't matter. I'll just go for experience. I went along for the interview. I have no A-levels. I've got no O-levels. I had a portfolio that I'd worked hard on, and I got into Middlesex to do a foundation course. And the day I got my letter through to say I'd been accepted was the happiest day of my life. I can still remember sitting there. Look, you know when you open an envelope, you think it's just going to say no way. I opened it and sort of said, "With great pleasure to tell you the normal thing to say." And then again, I was older than anyone else in the foundation course. They were all 20s and 21-year-olds. But actually, I got on really well with them. And I thought, still this lack of confidence. I do want to go on and do an arts degree. And one of the tutors sort of said to me, while I was working with clay, actually, because I thought, I don't like clay. And he said, I really don't know how you're so hard on yourself when you can make something so beautiful. And I was absolutely astounded. I thought, and it was like the penny dropped. And I thought, I'll just get on and do this and stop being so full of lack of confidence. And I started to make. And I've always found that as well, that it's always nice to encourage other people, because there's so many, especially in the art world, there's so many people out there to knock you down or be a little bit snide or say something or be competitive against the other. And I find just sort of saying something positive occasionally. I don't say the positive things that people's work I don't like, I'm not that good, but to say positive things to other people, as in Twitter or in Instagram, not only makes me feel good, but it can maybe make a difference to the other person on the other side who's receiving that little bit of praise, because it made such a big difference to my life. And I'll always be glad for that tutor for just giving me those kind words of saying something good and positive.
That's such a lovely story, because it really just, it does reiterate, how much importance we put on other people's opinions as well. I think deep down you knew you had the faith, you knew you had the ability, but it is that outside validation that you sometimes you just need from somebody you respect. It's wonderful.
Exactly.
And I think there's some really interesting and supportive online communities as well around the art and design world as well. Actually, quite a lot of like Twitter groups and things like that, encouraging people to, whatever that is, continue push through the creative block or, get some feedback on work and all that sort of thing. Yeah, it's really cool.
It's a very difficult occupation. It's no way it's easy. It's almost out for rejection when you apply for galleries and they get back to you and sort of say, well, no, we're sorry, you're not really for us. That can be a killer. Or you enter a competition and say, we're due to the amount of number of people that have applied, we're sorry. And that can always, it never gets easy. There's no way that I've been at it for quite a long while. When I got rejection the other day from something I hadn't even applied for, which I thought, well, that beats it. I think I'd entered my name thinking I would fill it in, but hadn't got quite round to filling in the whole thing. So that beats it. I got rejected to something I hadn't even applied for. So beat that one. Wow. But you just have to get used to this rejection and realise that just have faith in yourself and keep on at it. And as I sort of say, some people sort of say, oh, I'm not doing this to sell. A little sale every so often not only means that you can keep on doing the work, that it can pay for your studio, it can pay for your materials, but it also gives you a little bit of self-assurance that what you're doing isn't that bad, that someone's going to get enjoyment out of having it.
So are you showing with galleries, or do you have more of your own shows, or do you sell directly from the studio these days?
I've got a few galleries that deal with me. Sheridan Russell Gallery, who takes me around most of the art fairs, who's a pleasure to work with. Richard has always given me so much confidence. The Garden Gallery, which is in Hampshire, which I've been exhibiting with them for several years. The Hannah Pichard Gallery, which has been exhibiting my work virtually from a month after I left college. I was quite lucky. After I left college, again, it was down to more stupidity than knowledge. I sort of tripped along to a couple of galleries and said, hey, do you want to exhibit my work? Thinking back on it in retrospect, and literally, as soon as I left college, I got a solo exhibition, and my work did sell sort of well. But lately I've been finding I've dealt with a couple of young men who are designers, and they're little small galleries, but I've really got a kick out of exhibiting. There's one, Mark over at in the Froome, a gallery over there, small little gallery, and another one in Swindon, the Oik Gallery, Nick. And it's been a joy dealing with the designer. Just the way they show my work. The one in Froome put a beautiful background against the work. They're little small things, but it's just nice to see the work shown in a different environment rather than a big white space. I had a big solo last year in Cheltenham, which was in a chapel, and it was a big exhibition. And work with these, let's say, young designers that are a joy to work with. And it's trying something else, different.
Is there any shows or anything that you're working towards now?
Not one particular show at the moment. I'm working to sort of reevaluate the work. So I'm leaving this sort of as a time for to rethink. I've done this before after I had, as I said, when I started work, I did these very figurative heads. And then I decided to leave the heads completely to move into the sort of very abstract plain pieces with the emphasis on the pure line. And now I'm leaving this sort of like gap before I think about an exhibition to rethink and reevaluate the work that I'm doing. So I'm taking it slowly and see what will come in the future. I'd obviously like an enormous big white space, and if the tape cut ring me up next week, I'll be absolutely overjoyed. But I don't think so. But you never know.
So who do you see your work ideally placed beside, or who would be an ideal artist to have your work alongside, or do you prefer solo shows?
I like a solo show, but again, I think it's really quite interesting, whoever is putting on the exhibition, that they come in with a non-prejudiced eye and sort of look at my work and look at the work that they think. Like, for instance, when the Oink Gallery, Nick in Swindon, it was very modern, the work that he put on, a little bit sort of edgy, which is not what I had thought, but it looked great together. They both held at their own. Also, I've been exhibited with some abstract painters, and a Russian painter in the gallery I exhibit with in Arundel, and that was a really good combination because he had a very strong colour palette, and my colour palette looked great up against his. So I think that when a gallerist comes, they've already got a vocabulary of their artists that they particularly like. And when they've decided to pick my work, they've already got a scenario in their mind. And I think that's just quite nice to look at things fresh. I never stuck with one particular way of how I actually want my work to be shown with her, as long as it's not on the floor. But no, I'm open to any sort of different sort of look on it. So no, there isn't. Obviously, I'd like to be next to Patrick Hearn, but don't think that's not much possibility either. But you never know.
But those sort of places do sometimes have, exhibitions by lesser known artists, for want of a better word. Like I think Yard does as well. And those sort of same artists that showed with at that worked at St Ives show at have their work in Jim Eads' collection, right, up at Cambridge and things like that. So it's always something to keep an eye out for, I guess.
Oh yes, Jim Eads' collection. Yes, I'd love to sort of go along and see that. Actually, it's just a little bit too far for me to travel, but yeah, that would be fantastic to see work in there. Actually.
Do you do much work to commission, or is it just, you're always doing what you want and then selling that?
I invariably do what I want. I've no objections to commissions. It would be great if I did have one. Say, for instance, what I was saying earlier, it would be wonderful to have a commission to a really large piece, because if you're working just financially to do a large piece is very difficult. No, I haven't had that many commissions. Invariably, people come in and see the piece that they want. Every single piece I do is unique. I never do two pieces the same. So it would be quite, if there was an interesting project came through and it was someone that knew my work and realised that the way that I did work, I think that would be a really exciting thing to do. But no, I say the last commission I did was a very long time ago when I worked on heads, but none with the new work that I'm doing now at the moment. But I'm always open.
Well, it's something to keep an eye out for, isn't it? You know, when I'm looking through these, proposals and things. So we'll see.
Yes, I think that might be really fun, actually.
So where can people find you online?
patriciavolk.org.
And also on Instagram at Patricia Volk. I'll find the links and I'll put them all in the show notes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Patricia, so much for talking to me today. It's been lovely chatting with you.
Yes, I look forward to hearing your podcast. Sounds like fun. Thank you.